Alrighty guys, welcome back to another chess endgame lesson, and in this video I want to show you guys a technique that you can use to prevent an enemy rook pawn from promoting to a queen. Now of course the rook pawns are the pawns on the A file and the H file, so our job whenever we're playing against an endgame with a king and a pawn versus our king, our main objective of course is to just go ahead and capture this pawn if we can. That would be ideal. However, oftentimes that's not possible. Either the pawn is too far advanced or it's protected by the enemy king. Tomato, tomato. So our next goal, if we just can't capture it, is usually just to get in front of the pawn. So of course, if we're standing here in the pawn's path, then it can't promote to a queen. And unless you kind of mess something up, this game is typically going to end in a draw in those cases when you can get your king over in front of the pawn. Now, sometimes that's not even possible. However, don't just throw up your hands, throwing the white flag yet. I'm going to show you guys a cool technique that you can use even when none of those two options are available. Wow, embarrassing. All right, so what is our goal? Well, what we want to do is we essentially want to trap this enemy king in front of the pawn. We want to trap it in the corner so it has no other choice but to pretty much repeat moves over and over again until it ends in a draw. So how do we do that? Well, before we do that, we need to understand what black's goals are. So our enemy, black, what they want to do, of course, we know they want to promote to a queen, but how are they going to accomplish that? Well, it just so happens that if the black king can get to either one of these two squares, C1 or C2, then in fact that would ensure that the black pawn could indeed promote. Now, why is that? Well, it happens that whenever the black king is in one of these two squares, then the squares around it that it controls makes it impossible for a king to get over here, go around here in time before the pawn can just march up and of course promote. All right, so we know that we definitely do not want the black king on either of these two squares. Now it's our turn to move. We obviously can't move to C2. It's protected by the king. So let's go ahead and move to C1. All right, looking good so far. Now, the black king, of course, doesn't want us to get in front of the pawn either because we know that would end in a draw. So what they're going to do is they're going to take their king and go ahead and march it over to A2. Again, they want to make sure that we don't get in front of the pawn. If that's the case, it's just going to end in a tie and they're going for the win. Now, what we are going to do is we're also, at this point in time, going to bump up to C2. So now, even though we're not any closer to getting in front of the pawn, what we are doing is controlling both of these squares right here. So at this point, black, of course, they need to get their pawn to promote eventually, so they're just going to start marching their pawn forward with the goal that maybe they can move their king out here and march their pawn ahead. All right, sounds simple, but now let's go ahead and do this technique. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to take our king and bump it back to C1. All right, that looks fine for the black king. Maybe they can move their pawn out here and then escape out here and then keep moving their pawn. So let's just go ahead, take this pawn, bump it up one more. And now this is the key moment in this lesson. We're going to take our king and move it to C2. So what we essentially did right now is, since our king is controlling these three squares, that means that this enemy king, it has no room to escape. It can't go this way, it can't go this way. All it can do is kind of toggle back and forth on A1 and A2. So even though we didn't capture the pawn, even though we didn't manage to get in front of it, what we did is we essentially trapped the enemy king inside a box on the corner of the board. So now this game might continue, of course. Black only has one move, A1, and whenever they do this, we keep mimicking. We just go to C1, again, maintaining control over these squares right here. And now let's say that they take, I don't know, even their pawn and go here, then we just go to C2, and that's a stalemate. So that is one way that you can end this game in a stalemate. And if you guys were saying, you know what, that's nice and all, but the black king, they had some other options back here. Again, they didn't really have to fall into our trap. So another route that we can take a look at is, all right, so on this move right here, black's third move, what they did in our example is they moved the pawn to A3. However, what they also could have done is they could have moved their king instead. Let's say they wanted to move it to b3 to also protect these squares and plan to march their pawn ahead. So what would happen in that case? Well, in that case, we would just take our king and plan to move it over to, well, in front of the pawn. So we're going to take our king, move it to b1. They're just going to continue with their plan, pawn a3. And now us, of course, when we get to a1, of course, this enemy king can't move away, or else we're just going to go ahead and attack the pawn. So what they can do is, best case scenario, just move the pawn to a2, and that's a stalemate. So either way, go ahead and whatever options you have available, start with that plan. If they respond in a different way, then we can alternate our plans to either saying, all right, we were going to trap the king, now we're just going to go ahead in front of the pawn. But either way, those are two techniques that you can use to end this game in a draw. Again, that works for rook pawns only due to the limitations of the edge of the board. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video.